We've got a crisis, right? Everyone agrees. You even opened the conversation by talking about the fact that we have a housing crisis. Either you've got parents who can help you with a deposit or you don't. If you don't, you're out. The whole cost of living crisis is deliberate.
It's hard to see how people can continue to get lending or get into the market.
Well, the only way to stop it being a crisis is for housing to be a bad investment. If we are going to keep civilization and life as we know it, then we have to completely remake the world.
Today on The Margin, we're joined by one of the most influential voices in Australian economics. For decades, Alan Kohler has helped the country make sense of markets, money, and the forces that are shaping our future. Fewer can explain them with the same clarity, authority, and depth as Alan can. He's not only observed the system, but he's helped define it how we understand it today. Alan, thank you very much for coming on The Margin.
My pleasure.
So, Alan, you've had a long career in journalism. You've covered Australian economics for just about as long as anyone. How did you get into journalism?
I got a job as a copy boy at the Australian newspaper in Melbourne when I was 18. Copy boy is somebody who makes the coffee.
A coffee boy or a copy boy?
Well, it should have been called coffee boy, but it was called copy boy. Which, I mean, it goes back to a kind of an old part of newspapers where they yelled copy, and a boy would, or usually a boy, but a young person would grab the thing off the typewriter of the journalist,
right,
and take it to the sub-editors or something.
Right.
So there was a person who did that. I mean, and that's kind of not what I did, but I did the filing, and I got their dry cleaning done for them and so on. But after that, I got a cadetship. And then did a cadetship. That was back when you didn't, in those days, you didn't go to university to be a journalist. You got basically an apprenticeship.
Right.
So journalism used to be a trade. Now it's a profession, and you have to get a degree in journalism. Everyone gets a degree in journalism, but not when I was a kid.
Did you ever go back and get a degree in journalism?
I did not.
No, just economics?
Didn't get that either.
Okay, there you go. So, I mean, we've touched a little bit about on your financial your history in journalism. Where I really want to focus today is winding back the clock. A lot of our clients are looking to get into the property market. They're young Australians that are really struggling with the whole housing crisis, and then we have another section of clients that essentially causes of potentially this bubble. So, figure one of this incredible essay that you wrote, The Great Divide by Alan Kohler, this one here. For those of you that haven't read it, I suggest you check it out. It sort of depicts full-time weekly earnings and dwelling prices changing at the start of the 21st century. Can you explain a little bit about what happened and how did they part ways so quickly?
Okay, up until about the year 2000, incomes and GDP and house prices were all increasing at about the same rate. Mm-hmm. And after the year 2000, house prices started increasing at double that rate, about an average of 6%, 6 or 7% per annum compound.
Yep.
After that point of time. So I thought the best thing to do in writing that essay was to find out what happened and when it happened, and that might help explain why it happened, because then I could interrogate what happened at that time, at that moment. And I learned that 4 things happened around about the year 2000. In September 1999, the Howard government halved the capital gains tax by changing the tax, the rules on capital gains tax, from adjusting it for CPI, which was the situation from 1985 when the capital gains tax was first introduced. So at the end of 1999, they changed that to being simply a 50% discount. Mm-hmm. Second thing was that they reintroduced first home buyer grants, which had been not being used for a while. The first home buyer grant was in the 60s, but Howard, the Hawke Keating government hadn't done it. Mm-hmm. Howard reintroduced first home buyer grants in 2000. The third thing was that the Reserve Bank cut interest rates 5 times. From 2001 actually, and that was because of the dot-com bust in 2000
right.
in the US, which saw the NASDAQ collapse and America go into a recession. Australia didn't have a recession at that time, but in order to prevent one, the Reserve Bank cut interest rates 5 times. And, if you have 5 interest rate cuts without a recession, that's going to supercharge property, which is what happened.
Absolutely.
And the fourth thing that happened was on July the 1st, 2001, the government changed the rules for foreign students. Up to that point, foreign students were divided into those from gazetted countries and non-gazetted countries. If you're from a gazetted country, which includes the US, UK, Canada, New Zealand, no problem, you just went straight in. If you were from a non-gazetted country, such as China or India, it was virtually impossible to get a student visa. And on July the 1st, 2001, they changed that distinction. So that, and also they made it so that the pathway from student visa to permanent residence was made much more transparent and much easier. So that took a little while to catch on, but by about 2005, 2006, there was a flood of students from China and India. The influx of foreign students was helped by, in 2006, the federal government put hairdressing and cooking onto the occupations in demand list, which is a list of things, occupations that they are looking for students to come and do a course and to get that job. And so what that meant was there was a big boom in colleges offering hairdressing and cooking courses to Indian and Chinese students.
Yep.
So in they came. And so from 2005, 2006 onwards, there was a massive increase in immigration in Australia. So net overseas migration went from 100,000 to 300,000 over the course of a few years. And so what you had then was a period of 10 years between 2005 and 2015 of more demand for housing than supply.
And you can also see that in Figure 5, rental vacancy rates from 2013 to, well, from that point, vacancy rates sort of peaked at 6.4% in 2015, and now they're at 1.5% as well. So,
yeah. So look, you had this combination of factors, and obviously, and the main problem is not so much that immigration increased so much, and there was a supercharged demand for investor housing from the the capital gains tax discount, and also the reduction in interest rates, and also the first home buyers grant. All of that led to extra demand, but there was nothing done to increase supply.
Right.
And so supply stayed the same, roughly. Australian housing approvals have been about 15,000 a month for decades and really haven't changed.
So just going back there to that year 2000 Howard government, so obviously 83 around there we had the Hawke government, then Keating government, and then why did John Howard do these 4 things? Why was he so aggressive in 2000 with interest? Well, interest rates was out of his hands, but the first home buyers grants, the capital gains tax in particular.
They certainly didn't see them as being 4 connected things that would lead to an increase in house prices. I don't think that was... I don't think they cared much about whether house prices increased. They certainly weren't trying to not increase house prices, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The capital gains tax discount came about because they wanted to reduce the company tax rate from 36 to 30%. And they appointed a panel of businessmen, 3 businessmen, to review the business taxation system in 1999. And the purpose of that review was to reduce the company tax rate, which the panel of businessmen duly recommended. But in the course of recommending that, they also recommended a reduction in the capital gains tax, or at least a change in the way the capital gains tax was calculated. Instead of it being, they recommended that instead of having an inflation adjustment, you make it a straight 50%. And their intention was that would lead to an increase in investment by Australians in shares. They thought that if Australians could be persuaded to buy shares and to have much more of much more investing in shares, as Americans do, then that would lead to more productivity and a lower cost of capital for Australian companies. The trouble is that Australians aren't that interested in shares, and so what it led to was an increase in investing in real estate.
Which is another part of the segment that I've sort of got here, which is the ideological and psychology behind housing in this country. Housing, as you mentioned, is no longer about shelter. It's more of a wealth creation energy, and we see that here at GreenRock. People are just, equities and funds are not really discussed by the general punter. They're very focused on property. Why is that? And was this always a thing, in the 70s and 80s?
You'd know this better than me, Michael. But the thing about housing is you can borrow 80%. So you're geared much more than shares. I mean, you can theoretically borrow 50% of your share portfolio, but people don't tend to do it.
Yeah,
it's too volatile, right? So, but everyone borrows against property. So your equity invested in property is 20%. So the leverage is tremendously powerful. And, people like also having a physical asset that you can look at. And
the banks must have a big part in this as well, because they seem to be more comfortable with property lending.
Well, there's a good reason for that, which is that the Prudential Regulation Authority changed the way that risk weighting works in the banks, and they reduced the risk weighting. This is in Basel II. They reduced the risk weighting on real estate versus investing in businesses, and so it's much better for the banks to invest in or to lend against real estate, because they have to have less capital against the loans, and capital's expensive. So they make more money as a result of that. They make more money from investing in real estate. And the other thing is that banks have become much more marketing oriented over the last, 20 or 30 years. They've kind of changed. When I was a kid, banks were rationers of credit. Now they're marketers of credit.
Yes.
So it's a whole different way of thinking, right?
That's interesting, isn't it? At what point did you see that happen?
It was gradual, I think. I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the way that bank executives are paid, so that they started getting much higher salaries and getting bonuses based on shareholder returns and profits, right? And so they were highly motivated to start selling loans rather than ration them.
That makes sense, and probably had a little bit to do with the Royal Commission as well, with...
Oh, yeah, I suppose. But, look, real estate, banks are human. People who run banks are human. They see real estate as solid, as just like their customers see real estate as being solid and worth getting into.
In your essay, you talk about the inequality directly to housing. Is it just going to be a divide now between you either have or you don't? You're either just renting for the rest of your life, like we see in pockets of Europe or all of Europe? Or is there a solution here?
Okay, well, so it already is a divide. The divide exists now.
Yep.
Either you've got parents who can help you
Bank of mum and dad?
With a deposit, or you don't. If you don't, you're out. You can't buy a house. So, and that's, that is a huge change in
when
society.
You say can't buy a house, I mean, because we have these conversations with people as well. I mean, I guess you could buy a house, it's just not in any affluent area or somewhere close to a Melbourne.
That's right. You can't buy a house anywhere near your parents.
Yes.
You can't buy a house where you want to. That's right. That's... So yes, you can buy a house as long as it's miles away, or it's small, or it's an apartment.
Which is obviously very challenging for a lot of people to get their head around and figure it out. If you could go back to that sort of 1999, 2000 era where these changes came in, what do you think they could have done differently? Or do you think what they did was fine?
They could have, as well as making changes that affected demand, they should have actually thought about supply and the construction industry. How many houses are we building? How many houses do we need to build? How do we make sure that we continue to build them? You know, there was no thought that went into that. And now we've got a situation where, tradies are getting older. There aren't that many coming through as apprentices anymore. The apprentice system hasn't really adapted to modern life. 20 years ago, apprentices started out when they were 16. They got their apprenticeship when they were 16, still living at home, didn't have a car. Now most apprentices have finished year 12, they're 18, they've moved out, they've got a car, they can't afford to live on the apprentice wages. So apprentices aren't finishing their apprenticeship. So there's not the sort of flow of tradies coming through.
Same with university students as well, I guess. Being on a university budget for 3 to 6 years is pretty challenging too.
Well, yeah, but that's part of the problem is that most parents want their kids to go to university, not to do a trade.
Yes.
And that's understandable, I guess, but that's leading to a shortage of tradespeople.
And I love on the back. Well, I don't love. I find interesting on the back of your essay here. It mentions that with the sweeping plains and having one of the lowest population densities on the planet, and such a shortage of, or such an enormous amount of land for houses, people seem to be congregating around Sydney, the most expensive place, one of the most expensive places on earth, outside of Hong Kong. Why is it? It's so fascinating. Australia's such a big place, yet we seem to be confined to these 3 cities.
Yeah, well, so I think it's partly because Australia's so dry. There's no rivers, or not many rivers. So if you look through Europe and America, where there are lots of cities scattered through the whole continent, that's because there's tons of rivers.
Interesting.
And there's lakes everywhere. There's rivers and lakes everywhere, right? So they're all got water.
Yeah.
We've got the Murray, the Darling, the Murrumbidgee, but that's kind of it. So there isn't enough. There basically isn't enough water to achieve that. That doesn't mean it's impossible. You could do it, but you'd need to really do it. I had a conversation the other day with Ken Henry, who's the former head of Treasury, who was head of Treasury when Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister, and he told me that Rudd asked him, "What do you think Australia's sustainable population is?" And this was when the population was 22 million. And Ken Henry replied, "It's 15 million." And Rudd said, "Yes, I agree, it's 50 million. We can have 50 million people." And Ken Henry said, no, 15, 1-5. And Rudd said, but we're already well over that. What are you talking about? He says, and Ken Henry's reply was, "Do you think this is sustainable, this population?" In order to even have the population we've got, but to increase population from here, according to Ken Henry, we should build another city for 10 million people somewhere in the country.
So should the government get involved in this build-to-rent or superannuation funds? Should they be building houses?
Yes, that's the only solution.
So you see that as the biggest solution here?
Well, it's the only solution because if you think about it, the reason we have unaffordable housing and a crisis is because for the past 25 years, house prices have increased by roughly 6% per annum compound, which provides a return on housing of roughly 8 or 9% with yield on top. Well, in order to invest in anything, super funds and private investors need 8 or 9% return. Right? So, and that can't happen anymore. We're at the point now where we've got to stop housing being a good asset to invest in. You might want to hear this, right?
No, I don't.
And your clients don't want to hear this, but we've got a crisis, right? Everyone agrees. You even opened the conversation by talking about the fact that we have a housing crisis, right? Well, the only way to stop it being a crisis is for housing to be a bad investment.
Well, what if you taper it down a bit and maybe focus on the capital gains tax and the negative gearings? Are they really the villains here? The tax?
It kind of doesn't matter what the issue is. Whatever you change, whether it's immigration, the tax, increase housing supply. I mean, the governments are all focused on increasing supply, right? That's the solution. They're not changing tax and they're not really changing immigration, right? So, but the focus is on supply, fair enough. Whatever solution you think of, the answer has to be that housing becomes a bad investment for quite a long time, because otherwise it keeps getting more unaffordable.
In the 90s and 80s, was housing seen as an investment vehicle at all?
No.
Or did you just buy a house to live in it? Because, your parents, it was £300, was it? What did they pay?
Yeah, that's right. So my parents bought a house, we bought a house, and we really wanted to buy a house because we wanted to get on the property ladder.
But I'm trying to go back in time, but why though? Because our generation wants to buy a house because we can utilise it to make money, leverage off our equity, whatever the reason might be. We see it as a good way to spend the money. Back then, was it purely about shelter and raising a family and stability, or was there a bit of a...
It was largely about that, but also housing did increase. I mean, it was increasing at around about 3% per annum.
Yep.
Right, which is the same as incomes and the same as... And if you're leveraged, as everyone was, 3% per annum can give you a decent return, right? The problem now is that if housing's rate of increase declines from 6% per annum to 3% per annum, back to what it was, before 2000, then the current level of unaffordability gets locked in, right? It stays where it is. Incomes and house prices continue to rise at the same rate.
Yep.
So it doesn't really change anything. It doesn't make housing more affordable. The only way to make housing more affordable is for house prices not to increase at all for quite a long time.
Do you see that happening now? I mean,
I don't.
I can't see how it can. I mean, I can see how some markets can keep rising, but do you think that we are in a bit of a bubble and a correction's coming, or not?
We're about to we've had one rate increase, a rate cut. We're about to get another one. We'll be possibly 2 or 3 more rate cuts. So we're going to have another series of 4 or 5 rate cuts, which are not going to lead to a housing crash.
No.
That's not going to happen.
Probably increase the demand, as you're saying. It's just the prices and the wages. It's hard to see how people can continue to get lending or get into the market.
That's right. So we're at a point where it's very difficult to see house prices continuing to rise.
Yeah.
Because people can't afford them anymore. But look, they are continuing to rise. Like after the when interest rates started going up in May 2022, and there were a series of 13 rate increases. At first, house prices fell by about 7 or 9%, and I thought, well, that's it. The housing bubble is over, and then house prices started rising again, even before rate increases stopped.
Bizarre.
And then the house prices increased back to above their previous peak. They stopped rising in November last year, fell by less than 1% over the following 3 months, and now have started increasing again.
Is the Australian housing market impacted by global markets? Is the saying, if America sneezes, Australia catches a cold, is that related to equities and shares, or do you think that has
mainly
a play
shares?
in property?
It really doesn't have much impact on Australian housing. I mean, it only has an impact on Australian housing via interest rates. So if interest rates are affected by global events, then that will affect housing.
And we'll sort of park that housing segment on the bench for the minute and jump over to the cost of living squeeze, which is another topic that we're seeing.
Well, it's not really another topic. It's the same thing.
It's sort of interrelated, really, isn't it? The cost of living, interest rates are up, inflation's been sticky. There's all these indicators that we use, unemployment, CPI, etc. Is there anything that the government is missing or we can be doing to get on top of this, or do we really only have that one lever, which is interest rates?
Yeah, well, that's the only lever, really. I mean, in fact, the government's been doing the opposite of that, been helping people get through the cost of living crisis. So the government hasn't been making it worse. They've been trying to make it better. I mean, the whole thing about controlling inflation, the whole way that the Reserve Bank controls inflation is by making life tough.
Yeah,
putting interest rates up so that, on balance, most people do it tough and cut back, and that results in inflation falling eventually. Which is so, you know, I mean, the whole cost of living crisis is deliberate.
Do you think the RBA has done a good job?
Well, yes, in the sense that inflation has been brought back under control. It peaked at 7.8%. It's now back to within 2 to 3% target range. So inflation controlled, and there's been hardly an increase in unemployment. So unemployment's gone up from 3.5% to 4%, 4.1. It's back to 4. You know, like it's. Unemployment's around about 4%, which is fantastic, really, when you think about it. I mean, usually when the inflation is brought under control, it's only through a big increase in unemployment. But that hasn't happened this time. I mean, I'm not sure that the Reserve Bank can take a lot of credit for that, but because they just put up interest rates, they didn't really have some magic
Do you
way
think they're too slow to the party, like that Philip Lowe era? Do you reckon it could have been actioned faster? I mean, hindsight's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, they could have. They should have, yeah.
Yeah. And look, because a lot of what we're sensing and hearing, a lot of people feel worse off, but yet we seem to have not hit a recession at all. It's sort of interesting, isn't it? It's like
No, we haven't. Well, we've had a what they call a per capita recession. That is, if you divide GDP by the population, GDP divided by population has been declining. Mm-hmm. Which tells you that the reason that we haven't had a recession is only because of immigration.
What about the government jobs as well?
And government. That's right. Two things that have kept Australia out of recession: immigration and government spending.
Okay, so that makes sense. So if the general Australian feels like it's been quite a challenge, it really is. We might be in a recession. It's just not technically labelled one. It's a GDP per capita recession. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
Yeah.
There you go. Another topic that I'd love to get your opinion on is climate, which I've obviously seen you commentate a little bit on over recent times. With this energy crisis too, what do you think is the best solution moving forward? It's a very debatable topic.
Oh, well...
Where do you start?
Where do you start? There's a quote in a novel called The Leopard, which I'm about to read. I haven't read it yet, but I know the quote, which is that in order for everything to stay the same, everything has to change. If we are going to keep civilization and life as we know it as the same, then we have to completely remake the world. There's an awful lot to do, and we haven't really begun. I mean, when I say we haven't really begun, I mean there's a lot of renewable energy being installed. That is the case, not just in Australia but everywhere in the world, particularly China. I saw a graph, which I'm probably going to use on the news tonight, showing the percentage of new electricity installation in the world globally that's renewable energy is now above 90%.
Right.
So, to that extent, the electricity system is being transformed. Mm-hmm. Not quickly enough, but it is. The transport system not being really done quickly enough. I mean, we sort of started to drive electric cars, but China is really leading the pack on that.
Yeah. It's good. I think we're going to get electric cars that are at least a little bit cheaper than the rest of the world, as we don't really have a car market anymore, do we, to protect?
Correct, that's right. So yeah, I mean, look. So one way that we're transforming the world is by electrifying everything. There's a long way to go to electrifying houses. You know, not really doing that to the extent necessary, and we have to remake food production. I mean, we can't keep we can't keep having livestock to the same extent.
And do you think there's, again, watching the mainstream media and seeing what I'm seeing publicised at the moment, the supermarkets and these big corporates seem to be a big part of the problem. Do you agree with that?
Well, they're responding to, public demand and also what the government's asking of them. I mean, so they just try to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, look. I think the most important thing to understand about climate change is that it's happening. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be stopped. We're not doing enough. Humanity is not doing enough to stop it. So therefore, the temperature is going to rise to more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures, possibly 3 degrees. That's going to mean life is going to change. We're not going to stop. Whatever the scientists say will be the result of climate change is going to happen.
Yeah.
So, whatever that is, whatever that's going to be, get ready for it. I don't know what it is. But what I read about it is that it's going to be really bad.
Yeah. It definitely keeps a lot of people awake in the younger generations. It's definitely spoken about, and there's a lot of active people, even in our business.
We baby boomers will all be dead. So, I mean, I'm worried about my grandchildren. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a topic, and hopefully our, re-elected government is all over it. But they seem to be a little bit more interested than potential other candidates. What are your thoughts on the election that's just passed? You think the result was written on the wall?
I think it was another climate change election. I think that I wrote for the ABC column yesterday, which was published, and I said that the Liberal Party started to destroy itself when it repealed the Gillard government's Clean Energy Act in July 2014. Mm-hmm. They repealed that. They danced on its grave. They were very happy about repealing it. That was the carbon tax or price on carbon legislation that was removed. And when in 2014, when they did that, the Liberal Party had 58 seats in the lower house, and they've now got 18. So in the last 10 years, they've lost 40 seats.
Okay.
I mean, they've
substantial.
They've been devastated.
Yeah.
Liberal Party and the Coalition. The Coalition had 90 seats.
Well, they're over now, I've just heard.
Coalition's ended because of climate change. They can't stay in coalition because the National Party cannot have a proper climate change policy because people in the country are going to be asked to do the most adjustment. The biggest adjustment is going to be required of people in the country because they have to have less livestock, much more trees, a lot more pasture and cropland given over to trees to offset carbon emissions, a lot more land taken up with solar panels and wind turbines, which they're against, and also a lot more poles and wires across their land. So the National Party can't actually do it. So what I wrote yesterday was that it's not possible for the Liberal Party to have an electable climate policy and be in coalition with the National Party, which is turned out to be correct within 24 hours, which was gratifying.
Yeah, I just saw that as I walked in here, which is interesting because essentially I don't know where that leaves the Liberal Party now, but
Well, it leaves them on their own, and they have to find a way to recapture
Some seats.
some seats. Well, in 2004, they won 75 seats, which would have been a majority on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not impossible.
Yeah.
They just have to find a way to come up with a proper policy.
Whilst we're on that point, speaking of politics, you know, Whitlam, Keating, Hawke, Rudd and Gillard governments and Howard governments, has there been anyone in particular in your time that you think has been the most sort of remarkable and really had the best interest, well, got policies over the line and executed them well as a Prime Minister?
Paul Keating.
Paul Keating.
As Treasurer and Prime Minister,
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
Why is that?
Well, he did stuff. I mean, he throughout his entire period, 1983 to 1996,
Yep.
so 13 years, he constantly did stuff that was for the benefit of the country.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not saying he's perfect. Not everything he did was fabulous, but he really was trying at least.
Yeah.
And he was trying to do stuff for the benefit of the country.
That's good to know. And who's been one of the most interesting people that you've interviewed in your time?
Well, Keating for a start, but I'm trying to. Now you got me.
You've got a few people, I'm sure.
Yeah, lots of people. I can't think of any.
Alan, thanks so much for attending today. That's been incredibly insightful. I look forward to watching you for many years to come on the ABC and all the other publications. Thank you so much for coming on board.
No worries.
Great stuff. Hey guys, thanks for joining and listening to this episode of The Margin with myself and Alan Kohler. We have some brilliant guests coming up in the next month, so feel free to follow us on YouTube or Spotify to make sure you don't miss out on those upcoming episodes. Also, greenrockadvisory.com.au. Check out our website for other services that we offer around housing, getting into the market, investing, accounting, or all forms of our financial services offering. We'd love to help you out and send you out some of our information.